CEO overhears black security guards speaking 15 languages, promotes him before end of his shift. The clock on Daniel Mercer's mahogany desk read 11:47 p.m. when he made the decision that would change everything. The CEO of Meridian Global Industries sat alone in his corner office on the 45th floor, staring down at the city lights that twinkled like scattered diamonds below. Most CEOs his age would be home with their families, but Daniel had never been most CEOs. At 42, he had built Meridian from a small consulting firm into a multinational corporation worth $3 billion. But tonight, something was eating at him. The quarterly reports spread across his desk told a story of success, but the whispered conversations in the hallways told a different tale. There had been leaks. Confidential information somehow finding its way to competitors. Small acts of disloyalty that, when added together, painted a troubling picture. Daniel had always believed that a company's true character wasn't revealed in boardroom presentations or annual meetings. It showed itself in the quiet moments, when nobody was watching, when employees thought their actions didn't matter. He had built his empire on unconventional methods, and tonight called for the most unconventional method yet. He picked up his secure phone and dialed a number he'd memorized but never used. "Marcus? It's Daniel Mercer. I need to cash in that favor you owe me." Marcus Chin ran the most discreet talent agency in the city. Not the kind that represented actors for movies or TV shows, but the kind that provided highly skilled performers for corporate espionage, security testing, and situations that required absolute confidentiality. "What do you need, Danny?" Marcus's voice carried the weight of old friendship and mutual respect. "I need a team of actors. 15 of them. Each one fluent in a different language. I'm talking native-level fluency, not textbook knowledge. They need to be able to play distressed clients, confused visitors, and..." Daniel paused, choosing his words carefully. "Potentially suspicious individuals. When?" "Tomorrow night." "And Marcus?" "This stays between us. The survival of my company might depend on it." 24 hours later, Daniel sat in his office again, but this time he wasn't alone with his thoughts. 3 wall-mounted monitors displayed feeds from security cameras positioned throughout the Meridian building. Tonight, he would see who his employees really were when they thought nobody important was watching. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Over the course of one night shift, his carefully selected actors would present a series of escalating challenges to his employees. Language barriers, ethical dilemmas, stress situations, and security tests. Most employees would fail. Some might surprise him. But he suspected most would simply pass the problems along to someone else, proving that his company had grown too comfortable, too complacent. Daniel's eyes drifted to one particular monitor showing the main lobby. A figure sat behind the security desk, barely visible in the dim lighting. Isaiah Cole. The man had been working night security for 3 months now, and Daniel knew embarrassingly little about him beyond what was in his employment file. 43 years old. Previous address in Chicago. Clean background check. No college degree listed. No special qualifications. Just another security guard in a city full of them. But there was something about Isaiah that had caught Daniel's attention during their brief meeting when he was hired. The man had a way of listening that suggested he was processing more than just words. His questions were thoughtful, his handshake firm but not aggressive, and his eyes held a depth that seemed inconsistent with his simple job application. Tonight, Isaiah would be tested along with everyone else. At exactly midnight, the first actor made her entrance. Li Wei, a 30-something woman who had spent her childhood in Beijing before moving to New York for graduate school. She was fluent in both Mandarin and English, but tonight she would speak only Chinese. Her role was simple: play a distressed client whose elderly father had supposedly been involved in a serious accident. She needed urgent help contacting someone from the company's Beijing office. Daniel watched through the security feed as Li Wei approached the main desk, her face convincingly tear-streaked, her hands trembling as she spoke rapidly in Mandarin. The audio was clear enough that Daniel could make out every word, though he understood none of it. He had specifically chosen languages he didn't speak to ensure the test would be fair. Isaiah looked up from his newspaper, and Daniel leaned forward in his chair. This was it. The moment that would reveal whether his instincts about people were as sharp as his business instincts. Most security guards would panic. They'd stammer through broken English phrases, maybe point toward the elevators and hope for the best. Some might call a supervisor, passing the problem up the chain like a hot potato. A few might try to use translation apps on their phones, fumbling through an awkward digital conversation. But Isaiah Cole did something that made Daniel's breath catch in his throat. He stood up, walked around the desk, and began speaking fluent Mandarin. Daniel's hand froze halfway to his coffee cup. The conversation was flowing naturally, Li Wei's distress visibly melting away as Isaiah nodded with understanding and began making phone calls. Within minutes he had contacted someone from the Beijing office, arranged for them to check on Li Wei's father, and even offered her a bottle of water and a comfortable place to sit while they waited for news. "What the hell?" Daniel whispered to his empty office. Isaiah's personnel file was spread on the desk beside him. High school diploma. 3 years in the army. Various jobs in maintenance and security. Nothing about languages. Nothing about international experience. Nothing that would explain how a night security guard was having a complex conversation in Mandarin Chinese with the fluency of someone who had spent years in Beijing. But the night was just beginning. At 12:47 a.m., the second scenario began. Two of Marcus's actors, both men in their 30s who had grown up in Moscow, entered through the parking garage entrance. They were supposed to start a loud argument in Russian near the loading dock, speaking aggressively about money and betrayal. The test was designed to see how employees handled potential violence and language barriers under pressure. Daniel switched his attention to the garage camera feed. The two men, Victor and Alexei, began their performance perfectly. Their voices echoed off the concrete walls as they shouted at each other in rapid Russian, their body language suggesting the argument might turn physical at any moment. Within 2 minutes, Isaiah appeared in the frame. He didn't run. He didn't call for backup immediately. Instead, he approached the two men with the calm confidence of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. And then, for the second time that night, Daniel's assumptions about his security guard were shattered. Isaiah began speaking Russian. Not just a few basic phrases, but complex, nuanced Russian that seemed to defuse the situation with surgical precision. Daniel watched in amazement as the argument dissolved into what looked like a friendly conversation, with both actors visibly relaxed and even laughing by the end. When Isaiah returned to his desk 15 minutes later, he made a brief note in his security log and continued reading his newspaper as if nothing unusual had happened. Daniel stared at the monitors, his mind racing. 2 languages. 2 completely different linguistic families. Mandarin and Russian. Both spoken with apparent native fluency by a man whose employment application listed his only skills as reliable and good with people. Who was Isaiah Cole? The question burned in Daniel's mind as he prepared for the third test. But already, he suspected that this night would reveal more than just which employees could be trusted. It might reveal that his most valuable asset had been sitting in the lobby all along, wearing a security uniform and flying completely under the radar. The real test was just beginning. Daniel's hands trembled slightly as he rewound the security footage for the third time. What he had witnessed defied every assumption he'd made about his night security guard. The Mandarin conversation had been flawless, not the halting, textbook Chinese of someone who had taken a few college courses, but the fluid, colloquial speech of someone who had lived the language. He pulled up Isaiah's employment file again, scanning every line with forensic intensity. Born in Detroit. High school graduate. Army service from 1998 to 2001. No mention of foreign deployments. No language training. No international experience. Yet the man downstairs had just conducted what sounded like a business-level conversation in one of the world's most difficult languages. Daniel's phone buzzed. Marcus Chin. "How's your test going, Danny? I need to know everything about one of my employees." Isaiah Cole. Night security. There was a pause. That wasn't part of our deal. Marcus, I'm watching this man speak languages that shouldn't exist in his vocabulary. Either he's the most underqualified employee in corporate history, or he's exactly the opposite. I'll see what I can find. But Danny? Be careful. Sometimes people hide their talents for good reasons. The warning hung in the air as Daniel ended the call. Through his monitors, he watched Isaiah methodically check each floor of the building, his movements efficient and purposeful. Everything about the man suggested competence, yet his file painted the picture of someone just getting by. At 1:23 a.m., the third scenario began. Maria Santos, a linguistics professor who had spent 5 years teaching in Madrid, entered through the main lobby speaking rapid, distressed Spanish. Her role was to portray a cleaning lady whose son had been arrested, desperately seeking help from someone in the company's legal department. Daniel had positioned this test carefully. He knew that Janet Morrison, the night shift supervisor for the cleaning crew, would be in the building. Janet was notorious for her impatience with non-English speakers and her tendency to pass problems up the chain without attempting to help. Sure enough, when Maria approached Janet near the elevator bank, Daniel watched the predictable scene unfold. Janet's body language screamed annoyance as Maria spoke increasingly frantically in Spanish. Janet held up her hands, shook her head, and pointed toward the security desk while backing away toward the elevator. "English only, honey. Security can help you." Janet's voice carried clearly through the audio feed. Maria stood alone in the hallway for nearly 5 minutes, her distress genuine now as she found herself abandoned by the first person she'd approached for help. Daniel felt a stab of shame at his own employee's callousness, even though this was exactly the kind of behavior he was testing for. Then Isaiah appeared. Daniel leaned forward as Isaiah approached Maria with the same calm demeanor he'd shown earlier. And for the third time that night, his security guard spoke a language that shouldn't have existed in his repertoire. The Spanish flowed from Isaiah's lips with the rolling cadence of someone who had spent serious time in Latin America. Not Mexican Spanish or the textbook Castilian taught in high schools, but the sophisticated, professional Spanish of international business. Within minutes, Maria's tears had stopped. Isaiah had made several phone calls, arranged for a Spanish-speaking attorney from the company's legal department to contact her in the morning, and had even provided her with a list of emergency resources for family members in legal trouble. As Maria left the building looking genuinely grateful, Isaiah made another brief note in his security log. 3 languages. 3 perfect interactions. 3 impossible conversations for a man whose resume suggested he could barely manage one. Daniel's coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he couldn't tear himself away from the monitors. Each revelation about Isaiah raised new questions. Where had he learned these languages? Why wasn't any of this on his application? And most importantly, what else was the man hiding? At 2:15 a.m., Daniel's questions took on a new urgency. 2 more actors entered the building through separate entrances. Ahmed Hassan approached from the parking garage, speaking Arabic and claiming to be a lost delivery driver. Simultaneously, Kwame Asante entered through the side entrance, speaking Swahili and portraying a confused night janitor from a temp agency. Daniel had designed this scenario to test how employees handled multiple crises simultaneously. Most people would panic, call for backup, or handle one situation while ignoring the other. But Isaiah wasn't most people. Through the security feeds, Daniel watched his guard move between the 2 situations with the precision of a chess master. He spoke to Ahmed in what sounded like fluent Arabic, giving clear directions to the correct loading dock. Then he seamlessly switched to Swahili with Kwame, helping him understand his assignment and providing him with the correct floor plans. 5 languages. 5 impossible conversations. Daniel's mind raced as he tried to process what he was witnessing. This wasn't just someone with a talent for languages. This was someone with serious, professional-level fluency in languages spanning 3 different continents. The kind of linguistic ability that typically required years of immersive experience or intensive academic training. Yet Isaiah Cole was working night security for $12 an hour. As Daniel watched Isaiah return to his desk and calmly resume reading his newspaper, one thought crystallized in his mind: either he had stumbled upon the most overqualified security guard in history, or Isaiah Cole was not who he appeared to be. The night was far from over, and Daniel was beginning to suspect that his simple loyalty test had uncovered something much more significant than employee dedication. He had found a mystery, and mysteries in his business were either opportunities or threats. He intended to find out which. By 3 a.m., Daniel had filled 3 pages with notes about Isaiah's linguistic abilities. Arabic, Spanish, Mandarin, Russian, Swahili, each conversation captured on security footage, each interaction more puzzling than the last. But the night was far from over, and Daniel's carefully orchestrated test was about to reveal something that would shake him to his core. The 6th actor of the evening was Dr. Priya Sharma, a software consultant who had grown up in Mumbai before earning her PhD at MIT. Her assignment was simple but culturally specific: arrive as a distressed tech executive whose presentation files had been corrupted, speaking only Hindi and requesting urgent help from the IT department. Daniel watched her enter through the main lobby at 3:17 a.m., her face a mask of professional anxiety. She approached Isaiah's desk speaking rapid Hindi, her hands gesturing frantically at a laptop bag. Through the audio feed, Daniel could hear the musical cadence of her native language, though the words meant nothing to him. Isaiah looked up from his security log, and Daniel held his breath. 6 languages would be impossible. No one learns 6 languages to native fluency without it being their life's work. No one hid that kind of expertise behind a security guard's uniform. But when Isaiah responded in fluent Hindi, Daniel's coffee mug slipped from his fingers, shattering against the floor. The conversation flowed like water, Isaiah's pronunciation and rhythm matching Dr. Sharma's perfectly. Within minutes, he had contacted the night IT support, arranged for emergency file recovery, and was walking her to the technical department on the 15th floor. The security camera in the elevator captured them continuing their discussion, Isaiah offering what sounded like technical advice in a language that Daniel was beginning to realize was just another tool in an increasingly mysterious arsenal. At 3:45 a.m., the 7th test began. Klaus Weber, a former Berlin police officer turned actor, entered the building speaking agitated German. His role: a confused contractor who had arrived for an early morning meeting but couldn't locate the correct conference room. Daniel didn't even bother hoping anymore. When Isaiah approached Klaus and began speaking what sounded like perfect German, Daniel simply added another checkmark to his growing list. 7 languages. 7 impossible conversations. But it was what happened at 4:23 a.m. that transformed Daniel's amazement into something approaching reverence. Tommy Rodriguez, one of the night custodians, was emptying trash bins near the lobby when Klaus passed by, still speaking German on his phone to maintain his cover. Daniel watched through the security feed as Tommy stopped working and began making exaggerated gestures, mimicking Klaus's accent in a cruel parody. "ACH, mein Gott, where is the bathroom?" Tommy said loudly to his cleaning cart, causing 2 other custodians to laugh. "Maybe the Germans should learn English before coming to America, ja?" Klaus, professional that he was, continued his phone conversation as if he hadn't heard the mockery. But Isaiah had been watching from across the lobby, and what Daniel witnessed next made him understand that his night security guard was far more than a linguistic anomaly. Isaiah approached the group with the same calm demeanor he'd shown all evening. But this time, his voice carried a quiet authority that cut through the custodian's laughter. "Tommy," Isaiah said gently, his voice carrying clearly through the audio feed. "That man is having a difficult evening. Maybe we could show him the same kindness we'd want if we were lost in a foreign country." Tommy's face flushed red. "I was just joking around, man. Nobody got hurt." "I know you were," Isaiah replied, his tone remaining patient. "But sometimes our jokes hurt people even when we don't mean them to. That gentleman speaks 4 languages. How many do you speak?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. Tommy mumbled an apology and returned to his work, the other custodians dispersing quietly. Isaiah walked back to his desk without fanfare, making no attempt to seek credit or recognition for his intervention. Daniel stared at the monitor, something shifting in his chest. This wasn't just about languages anymore. This was about character. About the kind of person who would quietly defend a stranger's dignity at 4 a.m. when he thought no one important was watching. Daniel's phone buzzed. Marcus Chen again. I found something on your security guard. You're not going to like it. Tell me. Isaiah Cole used to be Dr. Isaiah Cole, Ph.D. in International Relations from Georgetown, former professor at University of Chicago, specialized in Middle Eastern and Asian studies, spoke at the UN twice. Then 3 years ago, he just disappeared from academia. No explanation. No forwarding address. Nothing. Daniel's mind reeled. What happened 3 years ago? Still digging. But Danny? Whatever made him walk away from that life and take a $12 an hour security job, it was big. As Daniel ended the call, he realized that his simple loyalty test had uncovered something extraordinary. A man who could speak 7 languages fluently, who had addressed the United Nations, who had thrown away a prestigious academic career to work nights in corporate security. The question was no longer what Isaiah was hiding. The question was why. And Daniel was about to find out, because the most dangerous test of the evening was yet to come. At 5:15 a.m., the final test began. Daniel had saved the most sophisticated scenario for last, and watching it unfold would either validate his growing suspicions about Isaiah or reveal that even the most brilliant people could be deceived. Jean-Baptiste Rousseau descended from the executive elevator, his expensive suit and confident demeanor suggesting he belonged in the building's upper floors. A former intelligence operative turned actor, Jean-Baptiste was the most skilled performer in Marcus Chen's stable. Tonight, he carried forged contractor credentials, spoke fluent French with what sounded like a perfect Parisian accent, and had memorized enough technical terminology to fool most IT professionals. His mission was simple but dangerous: gain access to the restricted server room on the 32nd floor by claiming he needed to perform emergency maintenance on the European client database systems. The test would reveal how employees handled sophisticated social engineering attacks, the kind that cost corporations millions in stolen data every year. Daniel watched through multiple camera feeds as Jean-Baptiste made his first approach. Nancy Chen, the night shift receptionist for the IT department, barely looked up from her romance novel when the well-dressed man approached her desk speaking rapid French. Excusez-moi, je suis ici pour la maintenance d'urgence de serveurs, Jean-Baptiste said, his performance flawless as he showed her the forged work order. Nancy's response was exactly what Daniel had expected, and feared. She glanced at the official-looking documents, nodded without really reading them, and waved vaguely toward the elevator bank. Server rooms on 32. You'll need to sign in with security downstairs first. Jean-Baptiste thanked her and headed for the elevator, his first obstacle cleared with disturbing ease. Daniel's jaw tightened as he realized how vulnerable his company truly was. One employee down, and already a potential threat was halfway to accessing their most sensitive systems. The second test came when Jean-Baptiste encountered Mike Torres, a junior network administrator grabbing coffee from the break room. Speaking in French-accented English, Jean-Baptiste repeated his story about emergency server maintenance, adding technical details about database corruption and urgent client deadlines. Mike's response was even worse than Nancy's. Not only did he fail to verify Jean-Baptiste's credentials, he actually offered to escort him to the server room to save time. Man, if the European servers are down, we're screwed, Mike said, leading Jean-Baptiste toward the elevator. Good thing you guys respond so fast to emergencies. Daniel gripped his desk chair, watching his company's security protocols crumble like wet paper. 2 employees had encountered a potential threat, and both had not only failed to stop him, but had actively assisted him. If this had been a real attack, Meridian's corporate secrets would already be compromised. But the night was about to take a very different turn. As Mike and Jean-Baptiste approached the elevator bank on the 32nd floor, Isaiah appeared in the hallway. He was making his routine security rounds, clipboard in hand, moving with the methodical precision Daniel had come to expect. But as Jean-Baptiste and Mike passed him, Something subtle shifted in Isaiah's demeanor. Isaiah's eyes tracked the two men for just a moment longer than normal. Through the audio feed, Daniel heard him call out politely. "Excuse me, gentlemen. Working late tonight?" Mike turned with a friendly smile. "Yeah, this is..." He gestured to Jean-Baptiste. "Sorry, what was your name again?" "Jean-Baptiste Rousseau, de la Société de Maintenance Système." Jean-Baptiste replied smoothly, extending his hand to Isaiah. What happened next made Daniel's pulse quicken. Isaiah shook Jean-Baptiste's hand and responded in what sounded like perfect French. "Enchanté de vous rencontrer. De quelle région de France êtes-vous?" Jean-Baptiste's response was immediate and confident. "Je viens de Lyon, dans le sud-est." But Isaiah's expression changed almost imperceptibly. To anyone else, the conversation would have seemed normal. But Daniel could see something calculating in Isaiah's eyes, a sharpness that hadn't been there moments before. "Ah, Lyon," Isaiah continued in French, his tone remaining conversational. "Je vis que près de là-bas pendant un temps. Vous devez bien connaître le quartier de la Croix-Rousse." "Bien sûr." Jean-Baptiste nodded. "C'est un quartier historique très important." Isaiah smiled politely, but Daniel noticed his free hand moving subtly toward the radio on his belt. The conversation continued for another minute, Isaiah asking seemingly innocent questions about Lyon's geography and culture, Jean-Baptiste answering with the confidence of someone who had clearly researched his cover story. But when they parted ways, Isaiah didn't return to his rounds. Instead, he waited until Mike and Jean-Baptiste had entered the elevator, then immediately spoke into his radio with quiet urgency. "Control, this is Isaiah. I need a supervisor to 32 immediately. Possible security breach in progress." Daniel's phone rang before the elevator had reached the 32nd floor. "Sir, this is Isaiah Cole from Night Security. I have a situation that requires immediate attention. There's an individual claiming to be French contractor maintenance, but his story doesn't check out. He's attempting to access the restricted server room. What makes you think he's not legitimate?" Daniel asked, genuinely curious about Isaiah's reasoning. "His accent is wrong, sir. He claims to be from Lyon but speaks with northern French pronunciation patterns. Also, he said the Croix-Rousse district was historically important, but anyone actually from Lyon would know it's primarily known for its silk-weaving heritage, not general history. Small inconsistencies, but they add up." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. Not only had Isaiah detected the deception, but he had done so using cultural knowledge so specific that even Daniel, who had spent considerable time in France, wouldn't have caught it. "Lock down the 32nd floor," Daniel ordered. "I'm on my way down." Within minutes, building security had surrounded Jean-Baptiste, his forged credentials confiscated, his access to the server room permanently denied. Mike Torres stood nearby, his face pale as he realized how close he had come to facilitating what could have been a devastating corporate breach. As Daniel watched the scene unfold through his monitors, one thought dominated his mind: Isaiah Cole hadn't just demonstrated linguistic ability tonight. He had potentially saved Meridian Global Industries from a catastrophic security breach. And he had done it with the same quiet competence he brought to every other challenge, never seeking credit, never drawing attention to himself. Daniel knew that by morning, he would need answers. Not just about Isaiah's mysterious past, but about why such an obviously gifted individual was content to work in the shadows, protecting a company that had no idea what kind of guardian angel it employed. The time for observation was over. The time for truth had begun. Daniel's hands shook slightly as he composed the message on his secure phone. "Isaiah, please report to my office before your shift ends. 45th floor, executive suite." It was 6:47 a.m., and the first hints of dawn were painting the Chicago skyline in shades of gold and amber. Throughout the building, the night shift was preparing to hand over responsibilities to the day crews. But for Daniel, the night had been a revelation that would change everything. He paced his office, rehearsing the conversation that was about to unfold. How do you tell someone that their entire evening had been an elaborate test? How do you explain that what started as a simple loyalty assessment had become something far more significant? The elevator chimed softly, and Daniel's pulse quickened. Through his office windows, he watched Isaiah emerge into the executive reception area, his security uniform crisp despite the long night, his posture straight but unmistakably wary. "Come in, Isaiah," Daniel called, opening his office door. Isaiah entered with the careful steps of a man who expected bad news. His eyes briefly scanned the room, the security monitors still displaying building feeds, the scattered papers on Daniel's desk, the cold coffee mug and broken ceramic pieces still on the floor. "Sir," Isaiah said politely, his voice steady but cautious. "You wanted to see me? Please sit down." Daniel gestured to the leather chair across from his desk. "And relax. You're not in trouble." Isaiah settled into the chair, but his posture remained alert. 3 months of working night security had taught him that late-night summons to executive offices rarely brought good news. "Isaiah," Daniel began, then paused, searching for the right words. "What I'm about to tell you might come as a shock. The entire evening, every single person you helped, every crisis you handled, it was all planned." Isaiah's expression didn't change immediately, but Daniel saw something flicker behind his eyes. Understanding, perhaps. Or recognition. "I hired actors," Daniel continued. 15 of them, each fluent in different languages. The distressed Chinese woman, the arguing Russians, the Spanish-speaking cleaning lady, the German contractor, all of them. Even the French man trying to access our servers. It was a test. Isaiah was quiet for a long moment, his hands folded calmly in his lap. When he finally spoke, his voice carried no trace of anger or surprise. "A test of what, sir?" "Loyalty. Ethics. How employees respond under pressure." Daniel leaned forward. "Isaiah, you were never meant to be the focus of this test. You were just there. But you became the highlight of the entire evening." Isaiah's eyebrows rose slightly. "I'm not sure I understand." 7 languages, Daniel said, his voice filled with wonder. 7 different languages, spoken with native fluency. You handled every situation with professionalism and grace. You protected our company from what could have been a devastating security breach. And you did it all while thinking no one important was watching. Daniel paused, studying Isaiah's face. "But here's what I don't understand. I know who you really are, Dr. Cole. Georgetown PhD, University of Chicago professor, UN speaker. So why are you working night security for $12 an hour?" The question hung in the air between them. For the first time since entering the office, Isaiah's composure cracked slightly. His shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly, and his eyes drifted to the windows where morning light was growing stronger. "How did you find out?" Isaiah asked quietly. "I had you investigated after watching you speak Mandarin like you'd lived in Beijing. But the real question is why you never applied for anything higher. You're clearly overqualified for every position in this building." Isaiah was silent for so long that Daniel wondered if he would answer at all. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight of pain that made Daniel's chest tighten. "I used to have a different life," Isaiah said slowly. "Teaching was everything to me. Languages, international relations, helping students understand different cultures. I loved the academic conferences, the research, the feeling that I was making the world a smaller, more connected place." He paused, his hands clasping and unclasping in his lap. 3 years ago, I was supposed to deliver a keynote address at a conference in Istanbul. Important people were going to be there, diplomats, academics, policy makers. My wife Sarah and my daughter Emma were supposed to come with me. Make it a family vacation. Daniel felt his stomach drop, sensing where the story was heading. The day before we were supposed to leave, Emma got sick. Just a little fever, nothing serious. Sarah insisted I go anyway, said the conference was too important to miss. I almost stayed, but... Isaiah's voice broke slightly. I went to Istanbul. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken tragedy. There was an accident while I was gone, Isaiah continued, his voice barely above a whisper. A drunk driver ran a red light. Sarah was taking Emma to the pediatrician for her fever. They were finished instantly. Daniel closed his eyes, the weight of Isaiah's loss settling over the room like a shroud. I was giving a speech about international cooperation while my family was dying, Isaiah said. All those languages, all that knowledge, all those connections around the world, none of it mattered. I couldn't save the two people who meant everything to me. Isaiah looked up, meeting Daniel's eyes for the first time since beginning his story. I walked away from everything after that. The university, the conferences, the research. I needed a quiet life. A simple life. A job where I could help people in small ways without the weight of the world on my shoulders. Daniel felt tears threatening at the corners of his eyes. The man sitting across from him had lost everything that mattered and had chosen to rebuild his life in the shadows, using his extraordinary gifts to quietly protect others. Isaiah, Daniel said softly, I'm so sorry for your loss. Isaiah nodded, his composure returning. Thank you, sir. But you should know, working here these past 3 months has been good for me. Peaceful. I'm not looking for anything more complicated. But Daniel had other ideas. What he was about to offer would either be the opportunity of a lifetime, or the beginning of Isaiah's journey back to the world he had left behind. Daniel stood and walked to his windows, looking out at the city awakening below. The morning rush was beginning, streams of people heading to offices where they would spend their days in jobs that might not fully utilize their potential. He had almost made that same mistake with the extraordinary man sitting in his office. Isaiah, Daniel said, turning back to face him. What if I told you that you could help people in small ways and big ways? That you could use your gifts to protect not just this building, but potentially thousands of people around the world? Isaiah's brow furrowed. I'm not sure I follow. Daniel returned to his desk and pulled out a folder he had been preparing since the revelations of the night began. I want to offer you a position. Head of Global Security Liaison and Ethics. You would be responsible for developing security protocols for all our international offices, training employees on cultural sensitivity and threat recognition, and serving as our primary liaison with foreign clients and agencies. Isaiah's eyes widened slightly. Sir, I appreciate the offer, but the salary would be $180,000 a year, plus benefits and travel allowances. You would have a direct line to me and the executive team. Your own office, your own staff, and most importantly, the opportunity to prevent the kind of security breaches that could cost lives, not just money. Daniel leaned forward, his voice taking on an intensity that surprised even him. Tonight, you potentially saved this company from a catastrophic breach. But more than that, you showed kindness to strangers, protected people's dignity, and demonstrated the kind of judgment that can't be taught. Those are exactly the qualities we need in someone responsible for global security. Isaiah was quiet for a long moment, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. I'm not sure I'm ready to carry that kind of responsibility again. What if I told you that you wouldn't be carrying it alone? Daniel asked gently. What if I told you that the quiet help you've been giving as a security guard could be multiplied 1,000-fold? That you could honor Sarah and Emma's memory by protecting other families, other people's loved ones? The mention of his family caused Isaiah's breath to catch. For a moment, Daniel thought he had pushed too hard, crossed a line that shouldn't be crossed. But then Isaiah's shoulders straightened, and something shifted in his expression. The position would involve travel? Isaiah asked. Some, but nothing like your academic career. Mostly coordination from here, with occasional trips to assess security at our international offices. And Isaiah, if you ever feel it's too much, if you ever want to step back, you just say the word. No questions asked? Isaiah stood and walked to the windows, mirroring Daniel's earlier position. The sun was fully up now, casting long shadows across the city streets. For nearly 5 minutes, neither man spoke. Finally, Isaiah turned back to Daniel, and for the first time since entering the office, he smiled. Head of Global Security Liaison and Ethics, he repeated slowly. That's quite a title. It's quite a responsibility, Daniel replied. But after watching you tonight, I can't think of anyone more qualified. Isaiah extended his hand. When do I start? Daniel's grin was immediate and genuine. How about tomorrow? Take today to process all this. Come in tomorrow morning at 9, and we'll introduce you to your new team. They shook hands, and Daniel felt a surge of satisfaction that had nothing to do with business success and everything to do with human potential finally being recognized. One more thing, Daniel added as Isaiah moved toward the door. Tomorrow, leave the uniform at home. You'll be wearing suits from now on. Isaiah paused at the threshold, his hand on the door handle. Daniel, may I call you Daniel? Of course. Thank you. Not just for the opportunity, but for seeing something in me that I thought I had lost. As Isaiah left the office, Daniel returned to his monitors one final time. He watched as Isaiah walked through the lobby, past the desk where he had spent the last 3 months quietly protecting people who had no idea of his capabilities. Several early arriving employees nodded to him as he passed, their casual acknowledgments carrying no recognition of the fact that they were looking at a man who could have prevented international incidents if the night had gone differently. Isaiah paused at the main entrance, looking back at the building that had given him sanctuary during the darkest period of his life. Then he pushed through the revolving doors and walked into the morning sunlight, ready to return the next day not as a guardian in the shadows, but as a protector whose light could finally shine. Daniel smiled as he watched Isaiah disappear into the crowd of commuters. In 12 hours, his simple loyalty test had revealed corporate vulnerabilities, exposed employee weaknesses, and uncovered what might be the most valuable hire in Meridian's history. But more than that, it had reminded him of a fundamental truth that was easy to forget in the corporate world. Sometimes the most brilliant minds, the most capable souls, the most extraordinary people, choose to wear badges instead of ties. They work night shifts instead of day shifts. They protect from the shadows instead of leading from the spotlight. And sometimes, if you're paying attention, if you're looking for character instead of credentials, if you're willing to see past the uniform to the person underneath, you discover that your company's greatest asset has been there all along. As Daniel finally headed home after the longest night of his career, he carried with him the knowledge that come Monday morning, Meridian Global Industries would be a different company. Stronger, safer, and led by people who understood that true protection comes not from policies and procedures, but from individuals who choose to do right when they think no one is watching. The sun climbed higher over Chicago, and somewhere in the city, a former security guard was preparing to change the world one small act of protection at a time.